Thank you, Gabriel. I think, ladies and gentlemen, it's a matter of just helping yourselves. We target to recommence the formalities around 8 p.m. Please enjoy yourselves. We're going to refer to Jack and Daisy Hillis as well, Ian's father, who also dairy farmed on Kendall's Line. That is a property presently farmed by Derek and Kath Underwood. Yes, I remember Jack Hillis, as no doubt many of you do. He was a qualified electrician, and he certainly used those skills for the benefit of the district and indeed for the school. They tell me, Ian, that your skills are not too far behind those of your father. Still on that property at the present time, Derek, we have that Danish piggery, and that, when it was built, was one of the hallmarks of the region. Every dairy farmer, of course, having pigs at that point. And I remember visiting that establishment as a youngster with my father. I'm afraid, Colin Austin, you're going to listen to a few scenarios from ex-councillors, and Jack Hillis was amongst that group who served as a county councillor on the Kairinga Council. The Hillis family have been a great asset to the community and have freely given of their time. Ian, I invite you to propose the loyal toast.
Thank you, John, for those kind remarks. I think you made me sound better than what I really am. Actually, your father was a fairly hard act to follow, and I endeavoured to do what I could for the district. Before we go any further, I've got a very special request tonight. I'd like all the ladies in the meeting here tonight to have a look at their shoes. Yeah, I'm serious about this. Just check your shoes, all you ladies. Yeah, all have a look? Are they both the same colour? I'm just wondering what colour Don's going to bring back for Helen when he goes to he's going to bring her back a navy blue one or a green colour. I've been waiting for many years to get one on you, Helen. About 30 years. Sorry about that, Helen. I just couldn't let that one pass. Ladies and gentlemen, busy dignity, I'm on a time limit, I believe, tonight, 5 minutes. I don't know whether there's a penalty for going under the 5 minutes, but I'm a bit worried that when the bicentennial committee meet and they're looking for some more speakers for their toast, if I go for 5 minutes, they might miss me out. That's from the year 2089. But seriously, people, you know, Linton, we're 100 years old this weekend. New Zealand as a country is 150 years old or more. And our record is for loyalty to the Commonwealth and to the monarchy and 2 world wars and lots of other things that have happened in that period. I think New Zealand, as a people, have got a lot to be proud of. As a country, as Kiwis, we keep a pretty low profile, I think, most New Zealanders. And it's only when we get some natural disaster like a cyclone bowler or an earthquake. Over there. But looking around tonight, I don't know whether some of you people have noticed, but there's 1 or 2 itinerant Kiwis back here tonight. I won't mention names, but it must mean something at the back. Yeah. But seriously, people, I think loyalty is something that the grassroots of loyalty starts in our local communities. And Linton is such a place. And I think it really started in the pioneer families that actually settled in this community. And a lot of their descendants are sitting here tonight. Don't know who they are. Most of us know who they are. I, as John said, had the privilege of living in this community for 44 of those 100 years. I went to primary school here. I grew up, went to secondary school, married, raised a family, served on many committees, school committee, hall committee, young farmers, you name it. They got me pushed into it. And I found, the loyalty in a small community like this is absolutely tremendous. When you're on committees and chairing committees or secretaries or whatever, the whole community gets behind you. And that's what's so good about small communities, especially country communities, I think. And Linton's one of those places. And I don't think there's much more I can say, except our new motto for the school. I've got it written down there. Yes, this is the to thine ourself be true. And I think it could be easy to read, be loyal to yourself, to your ideals, your ambitions, and your morals. And finally, I would like to charge your glasses and rise, stand and drink a toast to that of loyalty. The royal toast.
Thank you, Ian. They tell me it's now a Ford Philstar. Registration ED798 and the last heading Dura dinner. We found him. We move to the question of the district post. When one talks about that, of course, it brings memories for many people. I found it extremely interesting today to talk to people such as Doris Chisholm, who lived in the McConnell on the McGovern property between 1910 and 1915. She was telling me how she used to ride her horse, Turangiyotu, through the cattle tracks on Tipuna Road. I spoke to Joe Lash. He told me he lived in Linton between 1926 and 1940. He said, I backed that horse and dray into that factory up at Tipuna there many hundreds of times. So I remember when the water wheels drove the machinery for the dairy factory, for the dairy shed, should I say. And then he said in 1940 we all went to the war. 5 of them. Trevor Ansell, I think, is here tonight. I remember coming back from Christchurch one day and I found myself sitting next to Trevor, who's a Boeing pilot. And he dipped his wings and he said, John, I used to live down there. That was on Bob Coker's property, where Charlie and Sue Cockrell live today. I think as we flash forward from there, I'm not sure whether Earl Crawford is here tonight, but in his 93rd year, no doubt he's the symbol of constitution and stability that's made this district what it is. And Harry and Jessie Sames, they tender their apologies, but the question I was really going to address, and I refer to loyal Craw, or more affectionately Roy as we knew him. And I just want to retrace just very quickly a couple of points that he used to tell us on occasion. He said, you know, we had awful problems, John, with stock problems, etc., whether it was grass staggers or milk fever, mastitis and the like. But I introduced at this stage Mavis Hook, who was Mavis Carr, with her sister Rennie, of course, and Reg, their father, was in charge of the piggery, which was close to the local cheese factory. That'll come back into being in a moment. Anyhow, in the process of dealing with the problems of dairy cattle, they tried kerosene inside and outside the quarter. Man or beast was another product. Chloroform was one that they tried. Injected this confounded stuff into the animal's quarter, and lo and behold, on this occasion, the cow dropped dead. I remember Roy telling me how Reg Carr, this is Mavis's father, came over with his sledge and they put the chain around the neck of this dead cow, pulled her out of the walk-through bale, put her on the sledge, and she was headed for the piggery where they boiled up and cooked up all the dead stock. And lo and behold, halfway across, the cow sat up, pricked up her ears, stood up and went for the leg of her life. And so it was that the different experimentation took place. Malcolm Greer, as I said, will propose the toast to the district. Malcolm and Jean, or should I say more particularly, the Greer family, are also part of that pioneering framework. They tell me, Malcolm, you had a cricket team on one occasion in the family structure. Malcolm had the capacity and the ability to do most things, and when he was running around in that little red truck, they told me they thought you were the Minister of Works. Malcolm was in charge of the scouting framework. He was a sergeant in the services. I think you'll note that aligned with Jean, Malcolm's wife, who was an accomplished pianist, that Alan, their son, is involved with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, and Bart also lives in Wellington. By the way, Noel James was telling me, Malcolm, that he met Jean, who used to work in Berryman's in Palmerston, as I understand it. And Jean had said to Noel, you know, I've just met this fine young fellow from Linton called Malcolm Greer. And Noel said he's a fine chap, and he claims the credit for the eventual marriage of the girl. Malcolm, I invite you to propose the toast.
Mr. Toastmaster, official guests, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. James is not quite right in actual fact. I have known Jean for some time previous to that. I have been invited to address the subject of the district. I find myself somewhat superseded. I will tell you that Wally Lawrenson, in writing the history, used me as a sounding board, as a cross-reference. He would dig something up and ask me to comment, was it correct? Now, I assure you the research that Wally did was correct. The problem was, my report was a bit like the hair on the top of my head, fairly thin. And I would like to, personally, thank Wally Lawrenson and compliment him on the tremendous job he has done in this, and references that he made in that book I have used partly for what my, hopefully, comments will be. I have decided, rather than look at people in the district, if I can find my glasses on for a second, but rather look at the district in a broader sense. While it's 100 years of the school, the district obviously was here before, and perhaps it is pertinent to remember that we, the Europeans, are not the first occupiers of this area. The Rangatahi people were strong and numerous on the Manawatu River, their name for the area is Te Kairanga, and the literal translation is the place of plenty kai, or good kai. And Manawatu was indeed just that to the mouth. Noticeable, the surveyors later also used that term. They were in strength in the area across the river from Linton, from Tukumaro north, certainly around Awapuni, Hokowet, and that area where there were bridges. There were pars in large numbers, and obviously they used the food capacity of the Kotarara River. There was plenty of evidence of that. And they also used the flats of the Makarua swamp. They traded in that. The earlier part of the history of the Manawatu is based on shipping coming up from Fox and trading with blacks in the barriers, and the Rangatone people took their share of that. They also took off what is now the Linton Camp tokra, which was of a very fine, high quality, and if you read Wally's book, you'll get another idea of this. So they were commercially interested. They were interested in living here, and they were certainly here when the white man came. The government purchased the area, and the survey made by J.T. Stewart, the government surveyor of 1863 of this area, is interesting reading in its own. He came in, surveyed this general area, the Palmerston North, and laid out the future of what is now Linton, which in his survey is not marked as Linton initially, but Fitzurban. In 1965, 5 years after Stewart's survey, a census was taken of the Manawatu in general, and what was Fitzurban contained 3 people. Fitzurban became available for purchase in 1877. Stewart, in his wisdom, drew up the consequences of what he saw. And what he saw was a large swamp of Makarua, commercially viable for the taking of flax, of hemp, of marine life, rovage, etc. And to the north, a large forest. He assumed that such an area would require a town. He designed one, the town of Linton, 20-odd thousand people he visualised, and proceeded to lay it out with service towns of Whitmore, etc. When you look at his survey, it's very interesting. He brought from England that practice of rural society, a town with large sections in the centre, diminishing as they went out to smaller sections, to a quite fantastic place of Whitmore, which was where presumably the peasants were going to live, because there were very little sections, and that's where the workers were going to come from. And as you went north into those hills, he laid out larger holdings of land. Now I'll make a point of this, because none of Stewart's bright ideas really happened. And herein lies the lessons for local government and town players and others, that in fact people do as they bloody well like with those towns. Please note, don't with the county clerk. All right, there were 2 sources of people into Fitzurban. In the north and in the south, ultimately by rail. Fitzurban had a bridge built in it by Isles in 1877, £7,000 granted for the same by the provincial government. He completed the contract in 18 months, not 2 years as the contract said, Again, contractors take note, they could do things on time in those days. But, again, the powers that be had not made any provision for approaches. They couldn't come out, be completed until the next year's vote because the Roads Board had that money. 1877, perfectly good bridge in the middle of the Manawatu River, you couldn't use it. Next year, Roads Board made a grant and the settlers moved in from the city area. 1886, the Manawatu Railway was developed from an abandoned government scheme that is quite interesting from Linton's point of view. The government assumed that a railway from Wellington would end up at Foxton, join the government line Foxton, Palmerston North, and so doing would trap all the trade of the Manawatu River, instead of going out by ship, would go out in the government railway. It didn't happen, and some very facile merchants in Wellington, the Manawatu formed the Manawatu West Coast Railway, and boom, and they put the line, as it is today, on the hillside of the swamp. So Linton got a railway station and a service, and I got it from private enterprise and not from the government. The day the government owned that railway, and you no longer get a service from it. All right, sections came available, people moved in, and they sold them at something like £1 plus an acre, and they moved in. Now, a lot has been said of the quality and the quantity of people and the work they did. I don't intend to pursue that. But what I will say is that those people worked very hard for what they had and were successful. Incidentally, if you look at the original uptake of sections of it, they also had some entrepreneurs, because titles were never taken on by the people that speculated in them, and quite a lot of them got their fingers burnt. To illustrate, I recall the late Sid Collis telling me a man once arrived from South Africa with a genuine title to the town of Linton, held by his grandfather, and where is it, Sid? And Sid said, well, it's bloody well out there, you find the place. All right, it happened. What they also did was that other thing in social services. They made their own lifestyle. They formed support and occupation of leisure time by clubs. And there were a large and varied lifestyle, social life based on community activities. And many is the story that could be told, should be told by somebody else, not in this short time. But they weren't all saints. The football team that went off to town sort of couldn't get down Main Street to catch the train because there was too many pubs in Main Street, right here the next day. And this happened on more than one occasion. The sports clubs of the day were embracing athletic style, and also in those days we didn't worry about chips, we had professional cycling. Some of the handicappers were local, of course. There wasn't no such thing as the New Zealand Federation, and it wasn't sort of unknown that in handicapping there was a local bias. And funny, when they were held in Linton, far more Linton people won than when they went visiting to other districts. Again, I suggest they were honest people of Linton. The development has been mentioned of farming, based initially on sheep, cattle, ultimately dairy, the ups and downs. By dint of hard work, by dint of considerable effort, Linton survived. It got those social services in the way of schools, halls, etc., etc. Because the people wanted it to happen. There was no government to give it to them. They did it themselves, and they made it work. And perhaps today we've lost a little bit of that kind of skill. They served New Zealand loyally and well in 2 world wars. The district, we paid the consequences of that, and that will be honoured tomorrow. In the period, perhaps you could say up till the Second World War, we lived very much in a confined community. We tended to live within ourselves. After World War II, we expanded and the world changed. But came to Linton in World War II was the Army. And perhaps it's one of those institutions that hasn't been mentioned, perhaps sufficiently. They gave Linton a lot. All right, I think some of the kids ran their own school and were finished. But they did a tremendous amount of work socially for Linton, still do, and I think Linton proper, because the Crown saw fit to put the camp in Linton. Today we have reached that stage perhaps where we've finished one century. We're about to start another. Those that are here 100 years hence, and it will be for certainly, will obviously be different to what we are. The circumstances have changed, local governments have changed, technology will change, and they will look back on us as fairly primitive people, I would imagine. But all primitive people survive, they make something of it, and Linton has done this in a very true and loyal sense. So, in final thoughts, I personally can look back on my life here with happiness and pride, and I'm sure you can and will. And in that sense, I would like you to charge your glasses and drink a toast to the district of Linton on the basis of a very happy memory of what has been accomplished and a hope for the future. Thank you.
Yes, we are going to march forward. I'm going to call on Roger Sheridan to reply to the words of Malcolm Greer. Roger is the son of Marty and Benny Sheridan. I was going to say Marty is the brother of Peter, because Peter's a bit of a wicked lad. When he was here 25 years ago, they tell me he confiscated a bottle of liquor, and I think he's going to do some shouting later in the night. But having said that, I'm going to say that the Sheridan family, like so many others, whether the Lynches, the Rickses, the Larsons, the Batchelors, the Collises, the Laurentsons, the Akers, the Bertha Currans, or whoever, really have gone to make up the heart and soul of the community. You know, Marty came, and I'm talking about Roger's father, Marty came here in 1921 at the age of 3. His father worked on the Akers estate for 22 years, and Marty tells me with 6-horse teams, he ploughed every corner of that estate. Marty lived the majority of his younger life in the first house on the right down Tipuna Road. And that's, of course, I'm coming back to Ron and Mavis. I come back to them all the time, don't I? That's where Ron and Mavis Hook lived. Where are you, Ronald? Ron and Mavis Hook lived there, and you know, we used to have great trouble with Ron when he used to come over to visit us. He'd go home, we'd always lose him in the fescue there. I don't know what they tell you about that. Anyhow, Marty tells me that some of the things they did in the earlier days, they hid in the holes that the stumps were pulled out of. They turned the saddles round on the horses when some of the adults were playing up. He tells me of the time when they drove 1,200 lambs down to the Linton station to be trucked away, when the pigs were also driven down in a mob to the station, and the cheese was loaded on from the local factory. And Roger's father ploughed the foundations of Tipuna Road with his 6-horse team. Roger is currently manager of Fletcher Steel in New Plymouth. As an ex-pupil and as an ex-caretaker, he's fully equipped to deal with the response. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, John. My paper's ready. Well, I thought 400 people was a lot sitting from where I was down there. I can tell you what, it's a hell of a lot more from up here. When I was first volunteered to respond to this toast by my father, thanks Dad, my first reaction was, what will I say and how will I make it last 10 minutes? Well, firstly, I decided I couldn't make it last 10 minutes. The most difficult part was, how should I start? Should I say, unaccustomed as I am to public speaking? I am. Public speaking is definitely something that should be done before, eating should be done before the, public speaking should be done before the eating. And I would suggest to Dale and his committee, when they put the time capsule down tomorrow, they should suggest that for the next centenary in 100 years' time. Or I could start as Spike Milligan usually does when he addresses a group of people. He says, ladies and gentlemen, and those who've had their little operation. But I decided to be conventional and say, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Toastmaster, Centenary Committee, distinguished guests, boys and girls, and friends. By boys and girls, I mean all those who were born after 1944, which is my birthday. I would like to thank Mr. Whitelock for his kind words about the Sheridan family. We've been, Dad and his family came here, as he suggested, 70 odd years ago. So we've seen a fair bit of growth in Linton. And later in my small address, I would like to allude, maybe not so much the personalities, but maybe some of the qualities that made Linton what it is today. To reply to this toast, I consider it a great honour, not necessarily for myself, because maybe I'm not doing this by choice anyway, but for my family, as I suggested before, who've been here for 70 years. At first I thought it would be difficult to respond to this toast, as currently I'm not a district person. I thought maybe a person from the district should respond. And I've been out of the area for 17 years. But as John rightly said in his introduction, I was a pupil here for 9 years, and maybe because I was a pupil here for 9 years, a caretaker at the school for 11 years, I would have set some sort of record as a pupil and an attendee of Linton School. It was during these years as a pupil of Linton School and a cleaner that it became clear to me the sacrifices made by the people of Linton would stand the people, and not necessarily the people of Linton, but the people that moved further afield, would stand them in good stead, and all future generations would benefit from that. Mr. Matt Greer, who was also my scoutmaster, or a group leader at one stage, alluded to the progress made from the early surveying days right through to the current age. And when you consider that from ploughing fields and Maori tribes, we put a man on the moon some 20 odd years ago, and Linton's had to cope with all those changes. While talking about change, it reminds me of a little story that probably we can all learn from. It concerns a young Indian brave that was, instead of using the traditional greeting when he saw an Indian score, he would say, every time he saw one, he would say chance. This went on for 2 or 3 weeks, and the tribal committee, I suppose you could say would be the local school committee, similar sort of thing, decided to call this young fellow forward and say, you know, the traditional greeting is how. And what was your response to that? And the young fellow said, he said, I know how, all I want is a chance. I think the moral to that story is that we don't always learn from the people who have gone before us. I think some of the younger generations have a lot to offer. And I think that applies to Linton and not only Linton, but all of New Zealand. Mr. Greer also mentioned the army camp. I was the cleaner of the school when the school grew to 8 classrooms, and looking in Walter Lawrence's book, some 270 people. And within a space of a year, well, maybe just as the change occurred, it decreased to 3 classrooms. I would think that epitomises the determination of Linton people. Whilst the army can were of some assistance to the area, I think the maintenance of Linton as a district identity was a tribute to the determination of the people that lived here then. That was the sort of determination that took themselves, their ancestors, through an economic depression, the one in the 1930s, not the one in the 1980s, 2 world wars, and I think everybody that was about at that time epitomises that determination, and this carried forward by the local centenary committee who've made it their business to make sure Linton retains its identity into the next 100 years. I said my speech wasn't going to last for 10 minutes. Yeah. Is that that guy David Longstream in the background? I would just like to close by again saying that I hope and trust that all of us here are proud of their heritage and ancestors. And while many of us don't live here anymore, it is important that the high standards of respect and social standards are carried forward into the future, not only for the good of Linton, but as I suggested before, for the good of all New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. As we move forward to one of the highlight toasts of the evening, the school toast, that will be proposed by Charlie James. I think you all know that he's the son of Noel and Margaret. And could I just simply say that the James history is, like so many, very interesting. You know, Noel's grandfather was offered 500 acres in Rangitikei Street at £5 an acre. I think that's consistent with the flair the James family have never lost. After all, they've been in the farming scene, Charlie. They've been supermarket founders in the area. They're motor vehicle centre operators. And I'm not sure whether you all realise it, but Noel himself was a very distinguished entertainer. And I think that in itself is a very full and very important story. Because Noel, very often accompanied by Jean Greer, did entertain many people. And that started in Italy when Noel was overseas during the war. And he was working, he told me, in a hospital, an Italian hospital. And the Italian opera singers came through and entertained the wounded troops. And Noel joined in and started humming a few tunes, and lo and behold, a fellow by the name of Giuseppe Godana, I'm not sure he's in the mafia or what the hell he was, but he took Noel under his wing and he gave him singing lessons. And that is how Noel actually started his singing career. I think that's right, Jean, to say that, because you played for him very often. And Noel sang to an awful lot of people. So Noel the entertainer. Charles's grandfather was Charles Bradburn James. Very distinguished name, Charles, and it fits well with you. Ladies and gentlemen, I have pleasure in calling on Charlie to propose the toast, and simply would say he's always been a good lad and a bright lad, and it is said that after his first day at school, he said to his mother, "I don't need to go back tomorrow, I learned everything today." Charlie.
Thank you very much, John. There's a few more whiskies in here, walking away down the back here somewhere. I'd like to begin by extending a personal welcome to everybody here, past and present pupils and residents, and visitors, of course, and particularly those that come from a long distance. And I'd also like to offer my own congratulations to the committee and all their band of helpers that have been associated with the organisation of their centenary. Many months of hard work have gone into it, and I know that their efforts are appreciated by everyone here. When I was approached to propose this toast, well, my initial reaction was to get as far away from the place as I could run. But after giving it a lot of thought and a talk of the very persuasive Mr. Dale Craw, I realised that it was quite an honour to be asked to perform this toast, or propose this toast. And it's also an opportunity for me to give something back to the school where I spent my formative years and to contribute something to the centenary. A school like Linton is far more than just a place of learning. It's the focal point of the community around which many activities and organisations revolve. Among them, the Calf Club, Country Women's Institute, Lions, sporting activities, young farmers, and doubtless others that I've overlooked. They're all linked in some way with the school. The school is in effect the cement which binds a community like Linton together, and it's one thing that everyone here tonight has in common and can share with each other. I'd like to go over a brief history of the school, its origins, and before I do that I'd just like to mention that most of this information came from a preview of Wally's book, or a chapter on the school in Wally's book anyway. The school was first moved in 1887 when enough settlers had arrived here to give consideration towards establishing a school. Representations were made to the Wanganui Education Board to provide a building, and in April 1888 the first authorised school committee was elected. Their proposed boundaries were adopted by the Wanganui Education Board, and the site was chosen and cleared. Exactly 100 years ago today, on the 18th of March 1889, Linton School was opened, and the sole teacher was a Mr. Dougald Matheson, who we've heard mentioned previously at the centenary. The school was attended on the first day by about 20 children, and I've got them listed here and I'll just read their names. Leonard and Harold Bell, Dora, Nellie and Meredith Fitzsimons, Willie Jackson, Daniel Lynch, and there are still Lynches attending the school today, Gustav, Cassira, Henry, Sella and Oscar Larson, Albert, Alex and Isabella Ward, James, Simon, Robert, John, Angelina and Catherine Munro. There's a couple of fairly big families there, so I guess there's no TV in those days either. By 1890, there were 48 children on the roll. Their ages ranged from 5 to 17 years. By 1912, numbers were sufficient to warrant a second classroom and another teacher. And by 1917, a third teacher was appointed to the school. There were many events that affected the school and its teachers and pupils over the next few years. There was a polio epidemic in New Zealand in 1925, and many schools all over the country were closed for some time during that year. Linton was no exception to that. A major event at the school in the early 1920s, after much divining and willow waving, was an artesian water supply, and that was followed in 1927 by the building of tennis courts. But by far the most notorious event, I think, in the school's history was the fire which destroyed it and its records on May the 25th, 1934. There were house fires up Millbrook's Line about the same time, and arson was suspected, but of course no one was ever found or anything like that. It was 6 months later, in 1934, 30th November, that the brand new two-room schoolhouse was opened. And that was also the year, 1934, that the Calf Club came into existence in the school. And in the years since then, it's built a proud tradition in that field. The old school bars were built behind the present hall site in 1941. And manual training classes started in Palmerston North in 1942. The children were transported by train every fortnight to attend these. And when I was at school here, they were still going, but we busted in those days. It was a good way to get out of the academic side of things. Right, the roll was still climbing at this stage, so a third classroom and another teacher were appointed to the school. The Milton School Scheme, which a lot of people here will remember, arrived in 1953, as did I, not at the school, but came into existence. And every child had half a pint of milk before school, and that was quite an honour to get the job of washing the bottles while the other kids were in class. And I had a look for that the tap and whatever it was that we used to wash the bottles in, the foundations of it are still there, but it's not there anymore. So obviously the milk isn't there anymore either. During the mid-50s, with the arrival of Linton Camp, the school roll rocketed. There was also housing developments around the camp and at Hewitts Road. Prefabs were built at the schools to accommodate the extra numbers of kids. And during this time, I believe all the school functions were held in camp buildings as well. The dental clinic arrived in 1962, and Graham Irvine had the dubious pleasure of being its first victim. Didn't do him a hell of a lot of good though. I saw him smile before and I wasn't too pretty. Right, as Roger mentioned, by 1963, there was a record 270 pupils attending Linton School. That dropped to 102 the following year when the camp school opened. 1963 was also the year that the present school hall was built, and I believe there was a grant of £3,000 donated by the Lotteries Commission or the Golden Kiwi, whatever it was in those days. But that hall, when it was built, I believe was the envy of many schools around the place. After the camp school opened and the roll dropped quite dramatically, the prefabs were removed, the last one going to Freiburg High School in 1968. I was at Freiburg that year when that prefab arrived, and it was the one that I'd spent my standard 2 and 3 and I think 4 years in. And I was never taught in it at high school, but many times during lunch breaks, etc., I went in there and had a look around, and it was almost like an old friend. The smell of the place and everything was just the same. And remembered some of the good times I'd had out at Linton School here, and some of the hidings too, I guess. And the old palm stinging a fair bit when I was out here. In 1969, a new swimming pool was built and opened on the 24th of October. Don Rooks was the chairman of the school committee, and it was only fitting that he should be the first person to enter the pool. Don was a bit reluctant, unfortunately, had to be helped in and was no trouble getting willing hands to do that. Linton became a contributing school in 1974 with standards 5 and 6, or forms 1 and 2, attending intermediate schools in Palmerston North, and the roll dropped by 26. In 1986, much to Graham Irvine's relief, no doubt, the Linton School Dental Clinic closed, and the children were then, their dental care was taken care of at the Linton Camp Dental Clinic. And the Linton School roll is currently, I believe, 27, is it? Yeah, pity there weren't more oysters on the menu, I'd say. I'm a bit worried about that. I mentioned the first headmaster, Mr. Matheson, so it's only fitting to mention the current headmaster, Mr. Doug Drysdale. He and I were classmates at high school, and reasonably good mates too, I think. And I got quite a kick out of it when I heard he was appointed here, that a friend of mine from my high school days was going to be the principal of my primary school. But the one thing that puzzled me about that, Doug's appointment, he never learned a bloody thing at high school, so I didn't know how he was going to pass anything on out here. Many ex-pupils of this school gave their best, and some of them sadly gave their lives in the First and Second World Wars. Their names are listed with pride on the rolls of honour in the school hall. I can remember on many occasions being in the hall, looking up at those names, wondering what those men were like in their school days at Linton, what their war experiences were, and if I would be called on to follow their footsteps in realms other than at Linton School. And with a lot of pride looking at those names too. Of course, life at Linton School has had its lighter moments. In 1912 there was a headmaster here, Mr. T. Stagbull. He had a disagreement with the Whanganui Education Board, which was reported in the Evening Standard and other newspapers. And what Mr. Stagbull thought was a libellous manner, so he decided to take him to court over it. It actually won his court action, but he'd had trouble retiring on the 1 farthing damages he received. 1 farthing is a quarter of a penny for those young jokers down the back there. They can't remember that far back. 1/4% now, I guess. Then there's a story about the stand of 5 and 6 boys, Murray Ricks among them, I believe, John's father. He got hold of the teacher's strap one day when he was out. They cut it into small pieces, stuffed them through a knothole on the floor. Now, on discovery of this, young Murray was sent over to his father's bush. That's dead right. He had to cut some superjack, and he and his mates learned pretty painfully, I'd say, that crime did not pay. There's one other story that comes to mind, which I've heard a few times over the years. Of a young boy in the 20s who travelled to school on a horse-drawn vehicle driven by Wally's father, I believe, along with about 20 other kids. He was ejected from the vehicle one day for lifting up girls' dresses. I saw this man the other day. He's now well into his 70s. And I asked him, I'm not mentioning any names here, I asked him if he had any regrets over that incident. He said, I've only got one regret about that. I said, what's that? He said, I can't remember what the hell it was I was looking for. I hope that's not what old age does to you. Now, when we drink this toast, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to bear in mind that we're not just toasting the school itself, or as it is today, but we're paying tribute to those pioneers 100 years ago who had the foresight and the resolve to create Linton School for the district. And we're also paying homage to the generations of selfless persons, past and present, who have kept Linton School up and running through their tireless efforts. And now it's my pleasure to ask you to charge your glasses and be outstanding and join in drinking a toast to Linton School, 100 years old today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Just by the way, the people who are waiting for the ball, we're certainly running a bit over time. Andrew Lynch is going to fall out of his tree in a minute. You're very welcome. There's some chairs being positioned at the end of the hall. Peter Crawford and some of you fellows, can you make sure that the people who are waiting can just take up a seat at the end of the marquee, please? As we move forward, I'm going to ask Denise Satterley, as chairperson of the school committee, to respond to that toast. Denise, like a good number of us, I guess, is something of an immigrant. But having said that, Denise, you represent a very important and essential core feature of the district. Some would say it is an exaggeration of terms to say that there is held the future of our children and the families of the district. But I think in a nutshell, that's what it means, Denise. I have pleasure in calling on you to respond to the toast.
Mr. Toastmaster, Mr. Chairman, official guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed an honour and a privilege to be able to respond to the toast proposed by Mr. James to the school, and I thank those concerned for the opportunity to do so. I can remember 2 years ago when I was elected the chairperson of the Linton School Committee, suddenly realising that part of my official duty would probably mean making some sort of speech at the centennial celebrations. However, at that time, the centenary seemed a long way off, and so any thought of public speaking was put to the back of my mind. Now, after what seems a very short time, here I am speaking to you, and I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the school committee, the teachers and the present-day pupils of Linton School to sincerely congratulate the Centennial Committee on the results of this wonderful weekend that the members have planned and worked so hard for, and to welcome each and every one of you. Those of us who are associated closely with Linton School are very proud of the heritage that has been passed down to the present-day pupils by you and your forefathers. We are also very proud of the quality and dedication of our teachers at the present time. As in any occupational profession, there are good and bad teachers. I would presume that Linton School has seen some of each. I heard of one good teacher who was trying to deliver a lesson on an opossum that a pupil had brought to school. He still, many years later, has the scratch marks to show for his efforts, but the thing his pupils will most remember is the unscheduled lessons on words they had that day which were definitely not in the curriculum. I believe that where maybe 100 years ago all importance was placed on the teaching and learning of the 3 R's, I consider today's educational aims to be much wider. Our teachers today are trained to develop not only the academic qualities of our children, but also to develop the social and cross-cultural aspects. In Mr. Drysdale and Mrs. Heppy, our present staff, we have teachers that are giving of their best to our children, and we are very thankful to them. I must here make mention of the fact that Mrs. Heppy, having taught here for the last 15 years, is one of the longest serving teachers in the history of the school, and many of you here tonight may have come under her motherly wing in your first years at school. Through the years, our school has been built up by community support. All schools have teachers and pupils, but the best schools are those that have teachers, pupils and parents. This combination is necessary, and where the three work hand in hand, as at Linton School, you get the very best of education. I cannot speak highly enough of the parental and community involvement that we have here in this district where the school is concerned. Any event that is organised by the school, such as car club days, picnics, break-up concerts, sports days and the like, are attended by large numbers of parents and friends of the school. I can recall when the